Hi, this is Emily Leiphart of Art from the Heart, and in this video I'll be creating a card using the All My Heart stamp set, which is available for free for the next 2 months as part of the You're So Neat incentive program from Neat Tangled. I'll have all these details on my blog, so be sure to visit by clicking on the link below. This stamp set has everything you need to create a huge variety of thank you cards. I love that there are 2 large sentiments with several little sentiments that you can use to bump up the volume on your thank you cards. On my card, I'm also going to use the Punchinella background stamp to create a rough, artsy kind of background. In addition, I'll be using the little girl with the pigtails, plus the round circle stamp to create her torso. To set the scene, I'm using this speech bubble die from the Turkey Talk collection. I'll be using it to create a shaker window, as well as to create an opening for the girl to burst through. I'm starting with a 4" by 5.5" craft base, and the front panel is white linen cardstock, cut 1/4 inch smaller than the base. Now, I have to warn you that the design for this card was not completely thought out before I created it. I had a vision of what it would look like in the beginning, but I ended up having to improvise a lot and making several corrections before I was able to complete it to my satisfaction. It proves that it's good to take some risks when creating. My layout is going to be a long diagonal running down the length of the card from the top left-hand corner to the bottom right-hand corner. In the Gifts for You stamp set, the heads are just that, floating heads, and this is bad because I need the head to pop out past the neck. I'm going to use a solid circle stamp from that set to create a torso, and I'll show you exactly how I do that. This adds a lot of versatility to the set. Once all the elements are in place, I hold the die with washi tape and run it through my Big Shot. This top opening will feature the main sentiment from All My Heart, as well as form the shaker featuring sequins from the Pixie Dust mix. Then I position the die again at the bottom of the card and run it through my Big Shot. This opening will be where the girl bursts through. When I'm done, you won't be able to tell that this is a speech bubble die, so I'm showing you how versatile this die is. To create the starburst, I'm going to use patterned vellum from Cosmo Cricut's Voluptuous collection. Since I'm using the Punchinella background stamp, I thought the subtle circles would complement it nicely. I quickly use my design ruler to measure the opening so I can trim squares that are sized correctly for it. I cut 4 of them at 2.5 inches squared. I end up using only 3, but it's always good to have extras rather than too few. To create the explosion, I'm going to take a cutting mat and slice through the vellum with an X-Acto knife. The vellum has a front and back side, so I'm going to reverse it so that the front side is exposed when the torn pieces curve out from behind the white panel. I keep adding to make it look fuller and more authentic. One of the things I'm realizing in hindsight is that I should have marked which way the stack was originally placed behind that opening before I moved it to adhere the vellum layers together, and also to the back of the panel. Now I'm going to create the girl that bursts through to exclaim her thanks. I start by stamping her head in VersaFine Onyx Black ink. If I simply stamp the circle beneath the necklace, it would look disconnected and unnatural. So what I'm going to do is punch a 3/4 inch circle from masking paper and use it to mask off her necklace. Then when I stamp the solid circle just over the edge, it creates a neckline as well as shoulders for the girl. I remove the masking tape and she's done. I know she looks really weird right now, but once I trim her out and tuck her behind the opening, it'll look perfect. After trimming her, I tuck her behind the opening to show you how all these pieces will come together to form the scene. Now I'm going to separate the bundle of vellum layers from the panel and adhere them together with micro glue dots. This step is probably not necessary since the torn pieces seem to hold each layer together, but I decided to do it anyway. I use an X-Acto knife to slip all the glue dots in place. I used about 6 of them, and that is plenty. I've mounted the Punchinella background on a large acrylic block. I'll be using the brush end of a Versamarker to haphazardly brush Versamark ink across the stamp. I want it to be messy and artsy. I just want to make sure that it's going in the same direction as the diagonal I've created with the speech bubbles. After I stamp it, I pour glitter gold embossing powder on the ink. I forgot to use the embossing bag on the panel, so I get a lot of excess powder stuck everywhere. I use a small brush to remove as much as possible and then use my heat tool. That was a huge pain, so I must remember to always use my embossing bag. Now I'm going to adhere an acetate panel to the top speech bubble. I really wish I had traced the opening onto the craft card base before completing this step so I know where to stamp, but I do have a remedy for that, and I'll show you that in a bit. As with all my shaker cards, I use score tape around the edges to secure the acetate in place. In order to know exactly where to stamp, I'm going to use a temporary adhesive on the back of the positive die cut and place it behind the acetate. Once the panel is secured on the card base, I can push down and then use a pencil to trace around that. Now I know exactly where to stamp the sentiment. So you can use this method if you forget to trace the opening before adhering the acetate like I did earlier. After the sentiment is stamped with VersaFine Onyx Black ink, I can erase the pencil line. Now I'm going to create the walls for the shaker using foam tape. These sequins are from the Pixie Dust mix, and you see a piece of masking tape covering the compartment next to it because those haven't been released yet. You'll be seeing that next week. I don't want to add too many inside the shaker since the sentiment is going to fill up most of it and I don't want the sequins covering up the words. This card had a serious case of wrong order when I put it together. I really should have installed the vellum explosion before putting all those sequins into the pocket, but I can always place them afterwards. A lot of them are stuck there by static cling since it's winter and so dry. I'll just throw the other ones back onto the card before adhering the panel to the base. I believe I installed the explosion upside down from its original position when I created it. That's why I mentioned that I wish I had marked which side coordinated with the right-hand side of the panel. I would definitely remember to do that next time. At least it covered the tail of the speech bubble. That was the most important thing. Before placing the girl, I'm going to apply a ton of foam tape to the back of the panel so it stays in place and doesn't collapse anywhere. Both feature points need a lot of support. I'm also going to remove the backing of the adhesive on the girl as well as move the loose sequins over to the card base so I can adhere both the panel and the girl at the same time. At this point, I think that the girl's head needs to be even higher, so I add a small piece of foam tape right under her head, essentially doubling the height. The card feels bare to me even with the shaker, gold embossing, and the vellum layers. I decide to add a bold strip in the center to feature one of the smaller sentiments. It says, "From the bottom of my." I'll also add the heart to the bottom of the card to complete the sentence. I've cut a narrow strip of black cardstock, and I'm going to heat emboss the sentiment in the same glitter gold as the Punchinella background. This time I do remember to use my embossing bag, and what a difference it makes. After trimming the length of the sentiment strip, I'm going to heat emboss the heart on pink cardstock that coordinates with the dark pink sequins. I use white embossing powder, and after that's heated, I trim out the heart. Now I determine placement of these two pieces and adhere them to the card with foam tape. Since they'll be sitting on top of some of the vellum pieces, I use micro glue dots to hold those down. Otherwise, the sentiment and the heart will spring up and possibly become detached from the card. I use my design ruler to make sure that the sentiment strip is on straight. After the heart is adhered, I'd still think the card needs more. I decide to embellish with more sequins from the Pixie Dust mix. I'm going to randomly adhere them along that visual diagonal with micro glue dots. I'm scattering the sequins randomly. Since there's a bold pink heart at the bottom, I place fewer sequins there. At the top of the card, there's more empty space, so I add more sequins to make it look like they're flowing in and out of the shaker. Plus I use more pink sequins to balance out the bold pink heart at the bottom of the card. At this point, I realize my biggest mistake, and that may have resulted in me adding all that extra stuff. I didn't color the girl. Clearly, I was out of my mind because you know how much I love coloring. Well, as soon as I put my Copic marker on the girl, I also realized that it's not Copic-friendly ink. Yikes! So I've smudged it a little bit. I carry on, but I'm very careful to avoid the black pigment ink, and I'll be happy if I can salvage the girl and not have to re-stamp her. So please don't use the VersaFine pigment ink if you're using Copic markers. It definitely doesn't work together. As you can see, it takes a bit of maneuvering to get all the shapes on her sweater colored, but eventually I do manage to get it done. It's a good thing that I remembered to color in the skin between the necklace and the sweater. That really connects the torso to the head. I add a bit more shading to her hair, and then I'm done. Please refer to the supply links below if you're interested in any of the products I used in this video. You can also visit my blog for stills and more information about my work, as well as details on the You're So Neat incentive program at Neat Tangled. Thanks so much for watching!